My husband posted about our divorce online and ran off to Thailand with his affair partner, so I outsmarted him and took everything he left behind. Waking up to a notification from Facebook isn't unusual. Checking it that morning, the phone screen showed a post from my husband, Mark. He announced our divorce to the world, tagged a woman named Lisa, and included photos of them at the airport, boarding a flight to Thailand. The post said they were starting a new life together. My stomach dropped. He hadn't said a word to me. No conversation, no warning, just a public declaration while I was still in our shared home. The comments were already pouring in, friends, family, coworkers, all shocked, some asking if I was okay. I wasn't. My hands shook as I scrolled through the posts, trying to process it. Mark thought he'd gotten away clean, leaving me with nothing but humiliation. He didn't know I'd spend the next months turning his plan upside down. The days before Mark's Facebook post had been tense, but not unusual for the past year. Our marriage had been fraying. He'd grown distant, spending more time on his phone, taking sudden business trips, and dodging questions about where he'd been. I noticed small things, new clothes I didn't recognize, receipts for restaurants we never visited together, and a password change on his laptop. I suspected he was cheating but had no proof. I asked him once, point blank, if something was going on. He denied it, said I was paranoid, and turned it around on me for not trusting him. I let it go, not wanting to push him further away. We'd been married for 8 years, and I still hoped we could fix things. Looking back, I see how naive that was. Mark wasn't just pulling away, he was planning his exit. He'd been siphoning money from our joint accounts for months, moving it to places I couldn't track. He stopped contributing to our shared bills, claiming his freelance consulting work was slow. I covered the mortgage and utilities alone, dipping into my savings. The house was in my maiden name, a decision we made when we bought it because my credit was stronger. That detail didn't seem important then, but it became the foundation of everything I'd do next. When I saw that post, I checked our accounts. They were nearly empty. Our savings, built over years of careful planning, were gone. He'd even tried to list the house for sale through a shady real estate contact, but the deal stalled because he didn't have the legal authority to sign for me. That was his first mistake. After staring at Mark's post for what felt like hours, the shock gave way to panic. My phone kept buzzing with messages from friends and family, but I couldn't respond. The reality sank in. Mark had drained our joint accounts, taken our savings, and fled the country with another woman. I opened my laptop and checked every account I could access. Our checking account had $43 left. The savings account, which had over $60,000, was at zero. I found an email from a real estate agent discussing the sale of our house, addressed to Mark alone. The deal hadn't gone through because the title was in my name, and he couldn't produce my signature. My hands were shaking, but I forced myself to focus. I called my best friend, who recommended a lawyer she knew from her own divorce. I left a voicemail with the lawyer's office, explaining the situation in a rambling mess of words. Then I took screenshots of Mark's Facebook posts, the photos, and every comment he'd responded to. Something told me I'd need evidence. I also downloaded our bank statements and the real estate emails. The rest of the day was a blur. I barely slept, checking my phone for any sign of Mark contacting me. He didn't. By morning, the lawyer called back. Her name was Susan, and she was calm but direct. She told me to come in immediately with every document I could find. I gathered everything: bank records, the house deed, our marriage certificate, and those screenshots. I didn't know it then, but that was the moment I started fighting back. Susan's office was small, cluttered with files, but she was sharp. She listened as I explained everything: Mark's distance, the drained accounts, the Facebook post, and the attempted house sale. She took notes, asked for the documents, and started pulling up legal databases on her computer. She explained that Mark hadn't filed for divorce, which was critical. His post wasn't a legal document, it was just a public statement that could be used against him. The fact that he'd left the country without notice strengthened my case for abandonment. The drained accounts and attempted house sale pointed to financial fraud. Susan said we could sue for theft and unauthorized transactions, but we'd need proof. She asked if I had access to Mark's email or any shared accounts. I did. His old laptop was still at home, and he never changed the password. I went home and spent hours combing through it. I found emails between Mark and Lisa, confirming their affair going back at least a year. There were also messages to a bank in Thailand, setting up an account in his name. The most damning find was a scanned document with my forged signature, used to withdraw our savings. My heart raced as I forwarded everything to Susan. She said we could freeze his assets and file for an emergency injunction to stop any further transactions. She also suggested serving him legal notice in Thailand, which was possible through international channels. Mark thought he'd escape, but his digital trail was about to bury him. With the evidence from Mark's laptop, Susan moved fast. She filed a lawsuit for theft, fraud, and spousal abandonment, using the forged signature and bank transfers as proof. She also requested an emergency court order to freeze Mark's known assets, including the Thai bank account he'd set up. The judge approved it within days based on the clear paper trail and Mark's public Facebook post, which Susan presented as evidence of his intent to abandon the marriage. She explained that the post, combined with the comments where he bragged about his new life, painted a picture of deliberate betrayal. Serving Mark in Thailand was trickier. Susan worked with an international process server to deliver the legal notice to the address listed on his bank documents. I didn't know if he'd respond, but the notice was legally binding once delivered. Meanwhile, I kept digging through his laptop. I found more emails showing he'd been planning this for months, including one where he told Lisa he'd handle the finances before I could catch on. He'd also tried to transfer the title of our car, but that failed too, since it was in my name. Every misstep he made gave me more leverage. Susan warned me that international cases could drag on, but she was confident we'd win. The house, still in my maiden name, was untouchable, and the frozen assets meant Mark couldn't access the money he'd stolen. I started to feel a shift, not just anger, but power. He'd underestimated me, and that was his biggest mistake. While the legal process churned, I focused on securing my life. I changed every password, opened new bank accounts, and had the locks on the house replaced. I also hired a forensic accountant, recommended by Susan, to trace the rest of the stolen money. The accountant found that Mark had funneled some of it into cryptocurrency, but he'd used a platform that required identity verification. Susan subpoenaed those records, tying the account directly to Mark. The court issued another order to seize those assets, though recovering them would take time. I learned Mark had been living extravagantly in Thailand, renting a beachfront condo, posting photos of parties on Instagram. But the frozen accounts were starting to hit him. His posts became less frequent, and Lisa's tagged photos stopped altogether. Susan got word from the process server that Mark had received the legal notice but hadn't responded. That was fine. His silence worked in my favor. The court scheduled a hearing, and since Mark didn't show, Susan presented our case uncontested. The judge ruled that Mark's actions constituted fraud and abandonment, granting me full ownership of the house and any recoverable assets. The divorce was approved as a no-contest settlement, meaning I didn't have to split anything with him. I sat in the courtroom, stunned, as Susan explained that we'd won. Mark's plan to start over was crumbling, and I was rebuilding on the foundation he tried to destroy. Winning the court case felt like a weight lifting, but the reality of Mark's collapse was just beginning to unfold. The judge's ruling gave me full ownership of the house, the car, and any assets we could recover from the frozen accounts. Susan estimated we'd retrieve about 70% of the stolen savings, though the cryptocurrency portion was still tied up in legal limbo. The no-contest divorce meant I owed Mark nothing, no alimony, no split assets. His failure to respond to the legal notice sealed his fate. I learned through Susan's contacts that Mark's life in Thailand was unraveling. The frozen bank account left him unable to pay for the condo, and he'd been evicted. His social media went silent, but a mutual friend forwarded me a message Mark had sent, begging for money to get back on his feet. I didn't respond. Susan warned me he might try to return to the US and contest the ruling, but his passport had a legal hold due to the fraud charges. He was stuck, unable to leave Thailand without facing arrest here. Lisa, his mistress, was nowhere to be seen. I found her Instagram, which showed her back in the US, posting about new beginnings, with no mention of Mark. She'd left him when the money ran out, just as I'd suspected. The victory was bittersweet. I'd won everything Mark tried to take, but the betrayal still stung. I spent evenings walking through the house, now legally mine, feeling both relief and a strange emptiness. The fight wasn't over yet. There were still assets to recover, but I'd already reclaimed my life. As the weeks passed, I focused on rebuilding. I sold the car, which we'd rarely used, and put the money into a new savings account. The house needed repairs, so I hired contractors to fix the roof and update the kitchen. It felt good to make it mine in every sense. Susan kept me updated on the asset recovery. The Thai bank released a portion of the frozen funds after international pressure, and the cryptocurrency platform complied with the court order, transferring most of the remaining savings back to me. I used some of it to pay off the mortgage, securing the house completely. Meanwhile, Mark's situation worsened. A lawyer friend of Susan's in Thailand reported that Mark was living in a cheap hostel, taking odd jobs to survive. He tried to contact the US Embassy to clear his passport hold, but the fraud charges made that impossible. His attempt to start over had collapsed entirely. I didn't follow his every move, but the updates confirmed what I already knew: his plan had backfired. I started therapy to process the betrayal and rebuild my confidence. It helped me see that Mark's actions weren't my fault. I also reconnected with friends who'd supported me through the ordeal, hosting dinners at the house. The Facebook post that had humiliated me became a distant memory, replaced by a sense of control. I turned the tables, not just financially but emotionally. Mark was a ghost in my life now, and I was finally free. The dust settled, and I found peace in the life I'd rebuilt. The house, now mortgage-free and fully mine, became a sanctuary. I repainted the walls, planted a garden, and turned the spare room into a home office. Financially, I was secure. Most of the stolen savings had been recovered, and I'd invested carefully to ensure stability. Therapy helped me process the betrayal, and I learned to let go of the anger. Mark's life, from what I heard, was a shadow of his dreams. He remained in Thailand, scraping by on low-paying jobs, unable to return due to the legal hold on his passport. A final update from Susan's contact said he'd been seen alone, looking worn down, in a small coastal town. Lisa never reappeared in his story, and I didn't care to track her down. The Facebook post that had shattered me was now just a footnote, a careless move that handed me the upper hand. I never wanted revenge, only justice. Mark gave me the tools to reclaim everything when he thought he'd left me with nothing. Living in the house he tried to steal, surrounded by friends and a future I built, I know I didn't ruin his life. He did that himself the moment he hit post.